Long before the first stones were laid for the Great Pyramids, long before the first hieroglyph was carved into temple walls, the Nile Valley was home to scattered communities of hunters and gatherers who recognized the divine gift that flowed through their midst. These early peoples, dwelling in simple settlements along the riverbanks, understood that their survival depended entirely upon the annual flood that brought both water and the rich black soil that would make Egypt the granary of the ancient world. In the prehistoric mists of the 6th millennium before our era, these communities began to coalesce into larger groupings, developing the agricultural techniques and social structures that would form the foundation of one of history's most enduring civilizations. The rhythm of the Nile became the heartbeat of Egyptian civilization, its annual flood cycle marking not just the passage of seasons, but the very essence of life and death, renewal and eternity. During the season of Akhenaten, when the great river overflowed its banks and transformed the valley into a vast inland sea, the people retreated to higher ground and engaged in crafts, trade, and the elaborate rituals that would bind their communities together. As the waters receded during Pere, the season of emergence, they returned to plant their crops in the fertile mud left behind, and during Shemu, the season of harvest, they gathered the abundance that the river's blessing had provided, always setting aside offerings for the gods who controlled the sacred waters. As you drift deeper into the gentle embrace of sleep, imagine those distant ancestors gazing up at the same stars that wheel overhead tonight, seeking in the celestial patterns the divine order that governed their earthly existence. They observed that the annual flooding of the Nile coincided with the heliacal rising of the star Sopdet, which we know as Sirius, and from this celestial observation, they developed one of humanity's most accurate calendar systems. The appearance of Sopdet in the pre-dawn sky heralded the coming flood, and its emergence from the sun's glare became the beginning of their new year, a moment of cosmic renewal that aligned the heavenly and earthly realms. The gradual unification of these scattered communities along the Nile marked the true beginning of Egyptian civilization as we understand it. Archaeological evidence suggests that by the 4th millennium before our era, distinct cultural regions had emerged in both Upper Egypt, the southern portion of the country, stretching from the first cataract at Aswan, to the area around modern-day Cairo, and Lower Egypt, the fertile delta region where the Nile spreads into multiple branches before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. These regions developed their own distinctive artistic styles, religious practices, and political structures, yet they remained connected by the great river that served as both highway and lifeline. The mysterious period known as Dynasty Zero, emerging from the archaeological shadows of the late 4th millennium, reveals tantalizing glimpses of the process by which these separate regions gradually came under unified control. Powerful chieftains and early kings, their names preserved in fragmentary inscriptions and artistic representations, began to extend their authority over larger territories through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic alliance, and religious authority. The famous Narmer palette, discovered at Hierakonpolis and dating to around 3100 BCE, depicts what may be the symbolic unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single ruler, showing the king wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt in a powerful statement of unified sovereignty. This unification under the legendary king Narmer, also known as Menes in later Egyptian tradition, marked the beginning of the first dynasty and the commencement of Egyptian recorded history. The establishment of Memphis, strategically located at the junction between Upper and Lower Egypt, as the capital of this unified kingdom, demonstrated the new ruler's understanding of both geographical and symbolic importance. Memphis would remain one of Egypt's most important cities throughout its long history, serving as administrative center, religious hub, and symbol of the unified two lands that formed the core of Egyptian political identity. The early dynastic period, encompassing the first and second dynasties, witnessed the establishment of many of the fundamental institutions and practices that would characterize Egyptian civilization for millennia to come. The concept of divine kingship, whereby the pharaoh was understood to be the living embodiment of the god Horus and the earthly representative of the creator deity, provided both religious sanction and practical justification for absolute royal authority. This theological framework was not merely a political convenience, but reflected a profound understanding of cosmic order, whereby the king's proper performance of his sacred duties maintained the divine harmony known as Mayat that kept chaos at bay. As the night deepens around you and your breathing becomes more regular, let your mind wander through the corridors of these early palaces, where the foundations of Egyptian administrative practice were being laid. The development of hieroglyphic writing during this period represented one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements, providing the means to record not only royal decrees and religious texts, but also the practical details of taxation, trade, and administration that allowed the Egyptian state to function effectively across vast distances and diverse populations. These early hieroglyphic inscriptions, carved into ivory labels, stone vessels, and wooden tablets, reveal a society already sophisticated in its understanding of accounting, resource management, and ceremonial protocol. The artistic conventions established during the early dynastic period would persist virtually unchanged for over 3,000 years, creating a visual language of extraordinary consistency and symbolic power. The canonical proportions used in depicting the human figure, the hierarchical scale that indicated social status, and the composite perspective that combined profile and frontal views to present the most characteristic aspects of any subject, all emerged during this formative period. These artistic principles were not merely aesthetic choices, but reflected deep theological and philosophical beliefs about the nature of reality, permanence, and the proper relationship between the human and divine realms. The religious architecture of the early dynastic period, while less monumentally impressive than the later pyramids and temples that would define Egyptian civilization in popular imagination, established many of the fundamental principles that would guide Egyptian builders for centuries. The mastaba tombs of this period, with their rectangular superstructures built over underground burial chambers, demonstrated the Egyptian preoccupation with ensuring proper conditions for the afterlife, while also serving as visible monuments to the deceased's earthly status and achievements. The complex of buildings surrounding these tombs, including mortuary temples, subsidiary burials for royal retainers, and elaborate boat graves, revealed a sophisticated understanding of the requirements for successful transition to the afterlife. The Old Kingdom, beginning with the Third Dynasty around 2686 BCE, marked the flowering of Egyptian civilization and the achievement of a cultural synthesis that would influence human development for millennia. This period, often called the Pyramid Age, witnessed not only the construction of the most famous monuments in Egyptian history, but also the development of a complex bureaucratic system, sophisticated artistic and literary traditions, and religious practices that would form the core of Egyptian spirituality throughout the civilization's long existence. The reign of Djoser, the first king of the Third Dynasty, initiated this golden age with the construction of the step pyramid at Saqqara, a revolutionary architectural achievement that marked the transition from mastaba tombs to the pyramid form that would become synonymous with Egyptian burial practices. The genius behind Djoser's step pyramid was his chancellor and architect Imhotep, a figure so revered in Egyptian tradition that he was later deified and worshipped as a god of wisdom and medicine. Imhotep's innovation lay not merely in the pyramid's unique step design, but in his pioneering use of cut stone masonry on a monumental scale, creating the world's first large-scale stone building and establishing techniques that would be refined and perfected by later architects. The step pyramid complex, with its surrounding courtyards, temples, and subsidiary structures, created a permanent stone version of the temporary structures used in royal jubilee festivals, ensuring that the king could continue to perform the rituals necessary for maintaining cosmic order throughout eternity. As you sink deeper into peaceful slumber, let your consciousness drift through the vast necropolis of Saqqara, where generations of nobles and officials built their eternal homes in the shadow of Djoser's revolutionary monument. The mastaba tombs of this period reveal a society of extraordinary sophistication and artistic achievement, their walls decorated with detailed scenes of daily life that provide unparalleled insights into Egyptian society, economy, and religious belief. These tomb paintings and reliefs, intended to magically ensure that the deceased would continue to enjoy the pleasures and necessities of earthly existence in the afterlife, created a visual encyclopedia of Egyptian life that encompasses everything from agriculture and animal husbandry to craftsmanship and religious ceremony. The Fourth Dynasty represents the absolute pinnacle of Egyptian architectural achievement, producing the monuments at Giza that remain among the most recognizable and awe-inspiring structures ever created by human hands. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, built during the first half of the 26th century BCE, stands as testament to the extraordinary organizational capabilities, technical expertise, and sheer ambition of Old Kingdom civilization. Its construction required the quarrying, transportation, and precise placement of over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 15 tons, in a structure that rose to a height of nearly 500 feet and maintained its status as the world's tallest building for over 3,000 years. The mystery and grandeur of the Giza pyramids have captured human imagination for millennia, but their true significance lies not merely in their impressive scale, but in their embodiment of Egyptian religious and philosophical principles. The pyramid form itself represented the primordial mound from which the creator god emerged at the beginning of time, while the precise astronomical alignments incorporated into their design reflected the Egyptian understanding of the cosmic order that the pharaoh was responsible for maintaining. The internal chambers and passageways of these monuments, with their complex arrangements of galleries, antechambers, and burial chambers, created a three-dimensional mandala designed to facilitate the king's transformation from earthly ruler to cosmic deity. The Great Sphinx, carved from a natural limestone outcrop near the Pyramid of Khafre, embodies the fusion of royal and divine authority that characterized Egyptian kingship. With its human head representing royal wisdom and its lion's body symbolizing divine power, the Sphinx served as guardian of the Giza necropolis, while also functioning as a solar symbol associated with the sun god Re. The ancient Egyptians themselves regarded the Sphinx with awe and reverence, and later pharaohs regularly restored and embellished the monument, understanding it as a link to the glorious age of the pyramid builders. The social and economic organization required to construct these monuments reveals the sophisticated administrative system that characterized Old Kingdom Egypt. The pyramid builders were not slaves, as popular imagination often suggests, but rather organized teams of skilled craftsmen, seasonal workers, and specialists who were well fed, properly housed, and apparently took considerable pride in their work. Recent archaeological discoveries at Giza have revealed extensive worker villages, bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily, and burial grounds where pyramid builders were interred with dignity and provided with grave goods for their journey to the afterlife. As the gentle rhythms of night deepen around you, imagine the vast workshops and administrative centers that supported these monumental construction projects. The organization required to feed, house, and coordinate the labor of thousands of workers, while simultaneously managing the quarrying and transportation of massive stone blocks, demanded bureaucratic skills of the highest order. The surviving papyrus archives from pyramid complexes reveal a society capable of maintaining detailed records of resource allocation, work assignments, and progress reports with a precision that would be admirable in any era. The religious significance of the pyramid complexes extended far beyond the royal burial chambers at their hearts. Each pyramid was the centerpiece of a larger complex that included mortuary temples, causeways, valley temples, and subsidiary pyramids for royal family members, creating sacred landscapes that functioned as cosmic machines designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transformation into a deity. The daily rituals performed in these complexes, involving offerings of food, incense, and sacred objects, maintained the spiritual connection between the living and divine pharaoh, while also providing employment for hundreds of priests, administrators, and support personnel. The decline of the Old Kingdom during the later years of the 6th dynasty marked the end of the Pyramid Age and the beginning of a period of political fragmentation and social upheaval known as the First Intermediate Period. The causes of this collapse were complex and multifaceted, involving climatic changes that reduced Nile flood levels, increasing costs of maintaining the elaborate pyramid complexes, and the gradual decentralization of authority as provincial governors gained greater independence from royal control. The last kings of the 6th dynasty found themselves ruling over an increasingly fractured kingdom, where local officials often wielded more practical authority than the distant pharaoh in Memphis. The First Intermediate Period, lasting from approximately 2181 to 2055 BCE, was characterized by political division, economic hardship, and social upheaval that challenged many of the fundamental assumptions of Egyptian civilization. For the first time in Egyptian history, multiple individuals simultaneously claimed the title of pharaoh, creating competing dynasties based in different regions of the country. The 7th and 8th dynasties, based in Memphis, maintained nominal control over the traditional capital, but possessed little real authority beyond the immediate vicinity of the city. Meanwhile, the 9th and 10th dynasties, ruling from Heracleopolis in Middle Egypt, competed for supremacy with the 11th dynasty, based in Thebes in Upper Egypt. This period of political fragmentation produced some of Egyptian literature's most profound and moving works, as scribes and intellectuals grappled with the collapse of the cosmic order that had seemed so permanent and divinely sanctioned. The Admonitions of Ipuwer presents a vivid picture of a world turned upside down, where social hierarchies have collapsed and the cosmic order of Ma'at has given way to chaos. Similarly, the Dialogue of a Man with His Soul explores themes of mortality, meaning, and despair that reflect the spiritual crisis accompanying political breakdown. These texts reveal Egyptian civilization's remarkable ability to engage in profound self-reflection and philosophical inquiry, even during periods of crisis and uncertainty. As you drift toward deeper levels of rest, let your mind wander through the provincial courts and local temples, where Egyptian culture continued to evolve and develop, despite the absence of strong central authority. The political fragmentation of the First Intermediate period paradoxically led to increased cultural diversity as different regions developed their own distinctive artistic styles and literary traditions. The tomb decorations and inscriptions of local officials from this period reveal a more democratic approach to afterlife beliefs, as religious concepts previously reserved for the pharaoh became available to a broader segment of the population. The reunification of Egypt under Mentuhotep II of the 11th dynasty marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom and the restoration of centralized pharaonic authority. Mentuhotep's conquest of the Northern Kingdom around 2055 BCE ended the civil war that had divided Egypt for over a century and initiated a new golden age of artistic achievement, territorial expansion, and cultural synthesis. The establishment of Thebes as the new capital marked a significant shift in Egyptian political geography, elevating a previously provincial city to national prominence and beginning the rise of the Theban god Amun to supreme position in the Egyptian pantheon. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs faced the challenge of rebuilding Egyptian civilization while learning from the mistakes that had led to the Old Kingdom's collapse. They developed a more flexible and responsive administrative system that balanced central authority with provincial autonomy, allowing local officials greater independence while maintaining ultimate royal control over key resources and strategic decisions. The literature of this period reflects a more nuanced understanding of royal authority, presenting pharaohs as shepherds of their people rather than distant, godlike figures, and emphasizing the king's responsibility for maintaining justice and prosperity throughout the land. The 12th dynasty, beginning with Amenemhat around 1985 BCE, represents the height of Middle Kingdom achievement and one of the most successful periods in all of Egyptian history. These pharaohs combined military prowess with diplomatic skill, expanding Egyptian influence southward into Nubia, while maintaining peaceful relations with their northern neighbours. The construction of a series of massive fortresses along the Nile in Nubia demonstrated both Egyptian engineering capabilities and their systematic approach to territorial control, creating secure bases for trade expeditions while also serving as symbols of pharaonic power projected far from the traditional Egyptian heartland. The co-regency system developed during the 12th dynasty represented a sophisticated solution to the problem of royal succession that had plagued earlier periods. By associating their chosen heirs with royal authority while they still lived and ruled, the 12th dynasty pharaohs ensured smooth transitions of power and maintained political stability for over 2 centuries. This system required careful balancing of competing interests and personalities, but when it worked effectively, it provided Egypt with continuity of leadership and policy that contributed significantly to the dynasty's remarkable success. The economic prosperity of the Middle Kingdom rested on a foundation of agricultural abundance, expanded trade networks, and efficient resource management that reflected lessons learned from the Old Kingdom's collapse. The pharaohs of this period invested heavily in irrigation projects, land reclamation, and agricultural improvement, while also developing new trade relationships with distant lands. Egyptian expeditions reached as far south as modern-day Sudan and as far north as the Levantine coast, bringing back gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and other luxury goods that enriched the royal treasury and supported the elaborate court culture that characterized this period. As the night continues its gentle embrace, drawing you deeper into peaceful rest, consider the remarkable flowering of literature and intellectual achievement that characterized the Middle Kingdom. This period produced some of ancient Egypt's greatest literary works, including the story of Sinuhe, a sophisticated narrative that explores themes of identity, loyalty, and homecoming through the adventures of a court official who flees Egypt after a political crisis and eventually returns to find forgiveness and restoration. The technical mastery and psychological insight demonstrated in such works reveal a literary tradition of extraordinary sophistication and artistic achievement. The religious developments of the Middle Kingdom reflected both continuity with earlier traditions and significant innovations that would influence Egyptian spirituality for centuries to come. The democratization of afterlife beliefs that had begun during the first intermediate period continued and accelerated as religious concepts and practices previously reserved for the pharaoh became available to anyone who could afford proper burial preparations. The coffin texts, elaborate collections of spells and instructions for navigating the afterlife, were carved into the wooden coffins of middle-class officials and their families, providing them with the same magical protection that had once been the exclusive privilege of royalty. The Second Intermediate Period, beginning around 1650 BCE, brought another cycle of political fragmentation and foreign domination that tested Egyptian resilience and adaptability. The infiltration and eventual conquest of Lower Egypt by the Hyksos, a mixed population of Asiatic peoples who established their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta, represented the first successful foreign conquest of Egyptian territory in over a millennium. The Hyksos rulers adopted Egyptian royal titles and administrative practices, while also introducing new military technologies, including horse-drawn chariots and composite bows that would revolutionize Egyptian warfare. The Hyksos period, while politically traumatic for Egyptian national pride, also served as a catalyst for military and technological innovation that would contribute to Egypt's emergence as a major imperial power during the New Kingdom. Egyptian rulers in Thebes, who maintained independence in Upper Egypt while acknowledging Hyksos' suzerainty, gradually acquired the new military technologies and developed the organizational capabilities necessary to challenge their foreign overlords. The liberation wars led by the Theban princes Kamose and Ahmose represented both a restoration of native Egyptian rule and a transformation of Egyptian society that would have far-reaching consequences. The expulsion of the Hyksos and the reunification of Egypt under Ahmose the Firm around 1550 BCE marked the beginning of the New Kingdom and the commencement of Egypt's imperial age. The trauma of foreign domination had convinced Egyptian leaders that their traditional policy of defensive isolation was no longer sufficient to ensure national security, leading them to adopt an aggressive foreign policy aimed at creating buffer zones and securing access to strategic resources. This fundamental shift in Egyptian strategic thinking would shape the next 5 centuries of Egyptian history and establish Egypt as one of the great powers of the ancient Near East. The early New Kingdom pharaohs channeled the military innovations learned during the struggle against the Hyksos into systematic campaigns of conquest that extended Egyptian authority far beyond the traditional borders of the Nile Valley. Thutmose I, the third pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, led Egyptian armies as far north as the Euphrates River and as far south as the fourth cataract of the Nile, establishing Egyptian dominance over a vast territory that encompassed much of modern-day Sudan, parts of Libya, and significant portions of the Levant. These conquests brought enormous wealth into Egypt, while also exposing Egyptian culture to foreign influences that would contribute to a remarkable period of artistic and intellectual achievement. The reign of Hatshepsut, one of ancient Egypt's most successful pharaohs, demonstrated the remarkable flexibility of Egyptian political institutions and the sophisticated understanding of royal ideology that characterized New Kingdom civilization. Rising to power initially as regent for her young stepson Thutmose III, Hatshepsut gradually assumed full pharaonic authority and ruled Egypt for over 20 years with remarkable success. Her reign was marked by extensive building projects, successful trade expeditions, and general prosperity, while her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri represents one of ancient Egypt's most innovative and beautiful architectural achievements. As you settle deeper into the gentle rhythms of sleep, let your consciousness drift through the magnificent temples and palaces that rose throughout Egypt during Hatshepsut's peaceful and prosperous reign. Her famous expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, recorded in detailed reliefs at Deir el-Bahri, brought back exotic animals, aromatic woods, gold, and incense trees that were transplanted to Egyptian soil. These trading expeditions represented Egyptian civilization at its most sophisticated and cosmopolitan, demonstrating the kingdom's ability to project power and influence through diplomatic and commercial means rather than simple military conquest. The military campaigns of Thutmose III, following his assumption of sole pharaonic authority after Hatshepsut's death, established Egypt as the dominant power in the ancient Near East and created an empire that would endure for centuries. Known to modern historians as Egypt's Napoleon for his brilliant military leadership and strategic vision, Thutmose III conducted 17 campaigns in the Levant and established a system of client states and tributary relationships that brought enormous wealth into Egypt, while requiring relatively modest military commitments to maintain. His victory at the Battle of Megiddo, the first battle in recorded history for which we have detailed tactical accounts, demonstrated both his personal military genius and the professional excellence of the Egyptian army. The cosmopolitan character of New Kingdom Egypt reflected the kingdom's transformation from isolated river valley civilization into a great imperial power with interests and connections spanning the known world. The royal courts of this period attracted scholars, artists, and diplomats from across the ancient Near East, while Egyptian princes and princesses married into foreign royal families as part of an elaborate diplomatic system that maintained peace and stability throughout the region. The Amarna letters, a collection of diplomatic correspondence discovered in the ruins of Akhenaten, provide fascinating insights into this international world of royal diplomacy, trade negotiations, and cultural exchange. The reign of Amenhotep III marked the absolute zenith of Egyptian power, prosperity, and cultural achievement, earning him the designation of the Sun King of Egypt for the splendor and magnificence of his court. His palace at Malkata, covering over 30 hectares and including pleasure lakes, gardens, and pavilions decorated with the finest Egyptian art, represented luxury and sophistication on a scale that would not be matched until the palaces of later Persian and Roman emperors. The diplomatic correspondence from his reign reveals a pharaoh who ruled over a vast empire with confidence and skill, maintaining peace through a combination of military strength, diplomatic alliance, and cultural prestige. The religious revolution initiated by Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten in honor of his chosen deity, represented one of the most dramatic and controversial episodes in all of Egyptian history. His promotion of the sun disk Aten to supreme position in the Egyptian pantheon, while suppressing the traditional gods and their priesthoods, challenged fundamental assumptions about Egyptian religion and society that had remained unchanged for over a millennium. The establishment of a new capital at Akhenaten, modern Amarna, created a revolutionary artistic and cultural environment that produced some of ancient Egypt's most innovative and expressive art. The Amarna period, as this revolutionary era has come to be known, witnessed dramatic changes in Egyptian artistic conventions that reflected the theological and philosophical innovations of Akhenaten's reign. The naturalistic style that emerged during this period, with its emphasis on informal family scenes and emotional expression, represented a dramatic departure from the formal, idealized artistic traditions that had characterized Egyptian art for centuries. The famous bust of Nefertiti, Akhenaten's queen, exemplifies this new artistic vision with its combination of realistic detail and idealized beauty that seems almost modern in its psychological penetration and technical mastery. As the night deepens and your breathing becomes more regular, imagine the revolutionary atmosphere of Akhenaten during its brief flowering, when artists, poets, and thinkers gathered to create a new vision of Egyptian civilization under the patronage of their visionary pharaoh. The hymns to the Aten, composed during this period, reveal a sophisticated theological understanding that emphasize the universal nature of divine power and the intimate relationship between the pharaoh and his chosen god. These religious texts, with their emphasis on light, life, and divine love, influenced religious thought throughout the ancient Near East and may have contributed to later developments in monotheistic theology. The restoration period following Akhenaten's death and the abandonment of his revolutionary religious program witnessed a systematic effort to erase the memory of the Amarna period while restoring traditional Egyptian religious and cultural practices. The young pharaoh Tutankhamun, whose tomb would become the most famous archaeological discovery in Egyptian history, symbolized this restoration through his return to the traditional capital at Memphis and his patronage of the restored priesthoods. The magnificent grave goods discovered in his tomb by Howard Carter in 1922 provide unparalleled insights into the artistic achievement and material culture of the New Kingdom, while also demonstrating the enormous wealth and sophisticated craftsmanship available to Egyptian pharaohs. The Ramesside period, beginning with the 19th dynasty around 1295 BCE, represented the final flowering of Egyptian imperial power and witnessed some of the most ambitious building projects in Egyptian history. Seti I and his son Ramses II, known to history as Ramesses the Great, restored Egyptian prestige through successful military campaigns, while also undertaking massive construction projects that demonstrated the kingdom's continued wealth and power. The temples at Abu Simbel, carved directly into the cliffs overlooking the Nile in Nubia, stand as monuments to Ramesses II's ambition and serve as eternal testimonies to Egyptian architectural and artistic achievement. The Battle of Kadesh, fought between Ramesses II and the Hittite king Muwatalli II around 1274 BCE, represents one of the best documented military engagements in ancient history and illustrates both the glory and the limitations of New Kingdom imperial power. While Ramesses claimed victory in his official accounts, the battle appears to have been inconclusive at best, leading eventually to the world's first recorded peace treaty between the Egyptian and Hittite empires. This diplomatic agreement, preserved in both Egyptian and Hittite versions, established principles of international law and peaceful coexistence that would influence diplomatic practice for centuries to come. The long reign of Ramesses II, lasting 67 years, witnessed the completion of numerous architectural projects that rank among ancient Egypt's most impressive monuments. The Great Temple at Abu Simbel, with its colossal statues of the pharaoh carved into the living rock, was designed not only as a place of worship, but also as a political statement asserting Egyptian power and divine authority over the southern territories. The temple's interior chambers, decorated with scenes from the Battle of Kadesh and other royal achievements, created a three-dimensional propaganda environment that proclaimed Ramses's greatness to both Egyptian subjects and foreign visitors. The gradual decline of Egyptian imperial power during the later Ramesside period reflected both external pressures and internal weaknesses that would ultimately lead to the end of the New Kingdom. The invasions of the Sea Peoples, mysterious maritime raiders who attacked civilizations throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, severely strained Egyptian military and economic resources, while also disrupting the trade networks that had brought prosperity to the empire. Ramses III's successful defense against these invaders represented the last great military achievement of pharaonic Egypt. But the costs of these campaigns exhausted the royal treasury and contributed to the political instability that characterized the late New Kingdom. As you drift toward deeper levels of peaceful rest, let your mind wander through the workers' village at Deir el-Medina, where the artisans who decorated the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings lived and worked for generations. The detailed records preserved from this community provide unparalleled insights into the daily lives of ordinary Egyptians during the New Kingdom, revealing a society of remarkable literacy, artistic sophistication, and social complexity. The strikes and work stoppages that occurred when royal payments fell behind demonstrate both the economic pressures facing the late New Kingdom and the surprisingly advanced labor relations that characterized Egyptian society. The Third Intermediate Period, beginning around 1069 BCE, marked the end of Egypt's imperial age and the beginning of a long era of political fragmentation, foreign domination, and cultural adaptation. The division of the country between competing dynasties based in Tanis in the north and Thebes in the south reflected the underlying weaknesses that had been building throughout the later New Kingdom, while the increasing power of the Theban priesthood challenged traditional concepts of pharaonic authority. The rule of the high priests of Amun in Thebes represented a unique form of theocratic government that maintained Egyptian cultural traditions while adapting to new political realities. The Nubian conquest of Egypt during the 8th century BCE brought foreign rulers who paradoxically became some of the most enthusiastic champions of traditional Egyptian culture and religion. The Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, ruling from their capital at Napata near the Fourth Cataract, promoted themselves as restorers of ancient Egyptian traditions and undertook extensive building projects throughout Egypt. Their pyramids at Nuri and other Nubian sites represent a fascinating synthesis of Egyptian and local architectural traditions, while their religious practices often exceeded contemporary Egyptian pharaohs in their adherence to ancient customs and rituals. The Assyrian invasion of Egypt under Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal in the 7th century BCE marked the end of Nubian rule and established Mesopotamian control over the Nile Valley for the first time in Egyptian history. The Assyrian governors appointed to rule Egypt were drawn from local Egyptian dynasties, particularly the rulers of Sais in the western delta, who had collaborated with the Assyrian conquest. When Assyrian power declined later in the century, these site rulers were able to establish independent control over Egypt and initiate the site Renaissance, a remarkable period of cultural revival and artistic achievement. The site period, comprising the 26th dynasty from 664 to 525 BCE, witnessed a conscious effort to revive the glories of Egypt's pharaonic past, while adapting to the realities of a world increasingly dominated by foreign powers. The Sate pharaohs promoted themselves as restorers of ancient traditions, commissioning careful copies of Old Kingdom artistic styles and religious texts, while also encouraging trade and cultural exchange with the Greek world. The establishment of the Greek trading post at Naucratis represented the beginning of sustained Greek presence in Egypt and marked the start of the cultural synthesis that would reach its full flowering during the Ptolemaic period. The administrative and legal reforms of the Sate period demonstrated the Egyptian ability to adapt ancient institutions to contemporary needs while maintaining cultural continuity. The codification of Egyptian law under Darius I, who ruled Egypt as part of the Persian Empire, drew heavily on traditional Egyptian legal principles, while also incorporating elements from Persian administrative practice. This legal synthesis would influence jurisprudence throughout the ancient Near East and contributed to the development of international legal concepts that would persist into the Hellenistic and Roman periods. As the gentle night continues to embrace you, drawing you deeper into peaceful slumber, consider the remarkable resilience that allowed Egyptian civilization to maintain its distinctive character despite centuries of foreign domination. The Persian conquest under Cambyses in 525 BCE brought Egypt into the Achaemenid Empire, but Persian rule was generally tolerant of local traditions, and many Persian emperors presented themselves as legitimate pharaohs who honored Egyptian religious customs. The revolts that periodically challenged Persian authority demonstrated the persistence of Egyptian national consciousness, while the periods of independence achieved during the 28th, 29th, and 30th dynasties showed that the spirit of pharaonic Egypt remained alive even under foreign pressure. The conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE marked the beginning of the Hellenistic period and the establishment of Greek rule under the Ptolemaic dynasty. Alexander's respectful treatment of Egyptian religious traditions and his consultation with the oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis demonstrated the continuing prestige of Egyptian spirituality and wisdom in the ancient world. The foundation of Alexandria, which would become one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, created a new center of Greek learning and culture, while also serving as the capital of Ptolemaic Egypt. The Ptolemaic period, lasting from 305 to 30 BCE, witnessed a remarkable synthesis of Greek and Egyptian cultures that produced some of the ancient world's most significant intellectual and artistic achievements. The Great Library and Museum of Alexandria became centers of learning that attracted scholars from throughout the Mediterranean world, while Ptolemaic patronage supported advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and literature that would influence human knowledge for centuries. The translation of Egyptian religious and historical texts into Greek during this period preserved much ancient Egyptian wisdom that might otherwise have been lost, while also making Egyptian culture accessible to the broader Greek-speaking world. The religious practices of Ptolemaic Egypt reflected the complex cultural synthesis that characterized this period. The Ptolemaic pharaohs maintained traditional Egyptian religious ceremonies and building projects, while also introducing Greek deities and philosophical concepts. The creation of syncretic deities like Serapis, who combined aspects of Egyptian and Greek divine figures, demonstrated the sophisticated theological thinking that emerged from this cultural encounter. The massive temple complexes built during the Ptolemaic period, including the temples at Edfu, Dendera, and Philae, represent the final flowering of pharaonic Egyptian architecture and provide detailed records of Egyptian religious practices preserved in hieroglyphic inscriptions. The gradual decline of Ptolemaic power during the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE reflected both internal dynastic conflicts and the rising power of Rome in the Mediterranean world. The civil wars that divided the Ptolemaic dynasty weakened Egyptian independence while also drawing Egypt into the broader conflicts that characterized the late Roman Republic. The alliance between Cleopatra VII and Julius Caesar, and later with Mark Antony, represented desperate attempts to preserve Egyptian autonomy through alignment with powerful Roman leaders, but ultimately contributed to Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire. The final saga of Pharaonic Egypt unfolded during the reign of Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh and one of the most remarkable individuals in ancient history. Fluent in multiple languages and trained in mathematics, philosophy, and rhetoric, Cleopatra embodied the cosmopolitan learning that characterized Ptolemaic Alexandria, while also maintaining the ancient traditions of Egyptian royalty. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were driven not by romantic passion, as popular culture often suggests, but by sophisticated political calculation aimed at preserving Egyptian independence in an increasingly Roman world. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian's forces defeated the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra, marked the effective end of independent Egyptian civilization and the beginning of Roman rule over the land of the Pharaohs. Cleopatra's suicide the following year, choosing death over the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a captive, brought to a close over 3 millennia of pharaonic rule and transformed Egypt from an independent kingdom into a Roman province. Yet even in defeat, Cleopatra maintained the dignity and theatrical sense that had characterized Egyptian royalty since the time of the pyramid builders, staging her death as a final assertion of royal prerogative and Egyptian independence. The Roman period in Egypt, lasting from 30 BCE to 641 CE, witnessed profound changes in Egyptian society, religion, and culture, while also preserving many traditional practices and beliefs. Augustus and his successors recognized Egypt's unique importance as the grain supplier for Rome and governed the province through a special prefect answerable directly to the emperor rather than through the normal senatorial administration. This recognition of Egypt's strategic value ensured that Roman rule was generally careful to avoid disrupting the agricultural systems and local customs that maintained Egyptian productivity and stability. As you drift deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep, imagine the great city of Alexandria during the early Roman period, where the ancient wisdom of Pharaonic Egypt mingled with Greek philosophy, Roman law, and the emerging spiritual movements that would reshape the ancient world. The museum and library continued to function as centers of learning, while the city's diverse population included Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Jews, and countless other peoples drawn by Alexandria's reputation as a center of commerce and culture. The intellectual ferment of this cosmopolitan environment contributed to developments in astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and theology that would influence human thought for centuries. The gradual spread of Christianity throughout Egypt during the Roman period represented one of the most significant religious transformations in Egyptian history. The new faith found particularly fertile ground among the Coptic-speaking Egyptian population, who saw in Christian teachings both universal spiritual truths and a means of asserting cultural identity distinct from their Greek and Roman rulers. The development of Egyptian monasticism under figures like St. Anthony the Great created new forms of religious life that would influence Christian spirituality throughout the world, while the theological schools of Alexandria played crucial roles in defining Christian doctrine during the early centuries of the Church. The Coptic period, emerging during the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, witnessed the final transformation of ancient Egyptian culture as hieroglyphic writing gave way to the Coptic script and traditional Egyptian religion gradually yielded to Christianity. Yet this transformation was not a simple replacement of old with new, but rather a complex process of adaptation and synthesis that preserved many elements of pharaonic culture within Christian forms. Coptic art incorporated traditional Egyptian motifs and techniques, while Coptic literature preserved ancient Egyptian stories and wisdom traditions in Christian contexts. The remarkable continuity of Egyptian culture throughout these transformations reflected the deep roots that pharaonic civilization had established during its 3 millennia of development. Agricultural practices that had sustained Egyptian civilization since pre-dynastic times continued largely unchanged under Roman and Byzantine rule, while local religious customs and festivals adapted to new theological frameworks without losing their essential character. The annual flooding of the Nile remained the central fact of Egyptian life, and the cosmic rhythm that had shaped pharaonic civilization continued to influence Egyptian society and culture. The Islamic conquest of Egypt in 641 CE marked another major transformation, while also demonstrating the remarkable adaptability of Egyptian civilization. The Arab armies that entered Egypt found a sophisticated society with ancient traditions of administration, agriculture, and scholarship that the new Muslim rulers were quick to appreciate and preserve. Many Egyptian Christians converted to Islam over the following centuries, but the process was gradual and voluntary rather than forced, allowing for the preservation of much traditional Egyptian culture within Islamic forms. The medieval Islamic period in Egypt witnessed remarkable achievements in scholarship, architecture, and the arts that drew upon both Islamic traditions and the ancient heritage of pharaonic civilization. The Fatimid, Ayyubid, and Mamluk dynasties that ruled Egypt during this period created magnificent mosques, madrasas, and palaces that incorporated traditional Egyptian architectural elements while also introducing new forms and decorative techniques from across the Islamic world. The scholars of medieval Cairo preserved and transmitted ancient Egyptian knowledge while also contributing to advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. As the night deepens around you and your breathing becomes more regular, consider the remarkable persistence of ancient Egyptian influences in the cultural and intellectual life of medieval and modern Egypt. The Coptic Christian community that survived the Islamic conquest maintained many traditions that could be traced back to pharaonic times, while Islamic scholars and historians preserved Egyptian historical traditions and archaeological knowledge that would prove invaluable to later researchers. The annual flooding of the Nile continued to shape Egyptian life and consciousness, connecting modern Egyptians to their ancient ancestors through the eternal rhythm of the Great River. The rediscovery of ancient Egypt by European scholars during the 18th and 19th centuries initiated a new chapter in the long story of Egyptian civilization as archaeological excavation and scholarly research began to unlock the secrets of the pharaonic past. The decipherment of hieroglyphic writing by Jean-François Champollion in 1822, building upon the trilingual Rosetta Stone discovered by Napoleon's expedition, opened vast libraries of ancient Egyptian texts that had been sealed for over a millennium. These discoveries revealed the sophisticated literature, complex religious beliefs, and advanced scientific knowledge of ancient Egypt, while also demonstrating the remarkable continuity of Egyptian culture across the centuries. The great archaeological discoveries of the 19th and 20th centuries gradually revealed the full scope and magnificence of ancient Egyptian civilization. The excavation of sites like Saqqara, Abydos, and Deir el-Bahri uncovered treasures of art and artifacts that demonstrated the extraordinary artistic achievement of Egyptian craftsmen, while the discovery of royal tombs and temples provided insights into Egyptian religious beliefs and royal ideology. The finding of Tutankhamun's intact tomb in 1922 captured worldwide attention and revealed the incredible wealth and sophisticated material culture of New Kingdom Egypt. The systematic study of Egyptian texts and inscriptions revealed a literature of remarkable depth and sophistication that encompassed religious hymns, wisdom literature, historical narratives, and works of pure imagination. The Egyptian concern with cosmic order, social justice, and the afterlife created literary works that addressed fundamental human concerns with insight and eloquence that remains moving today. The instructions of Ptahhotep, the tale of the eloquent peasant, and countless other works revealed a civilization capable of profound reflection on ethics, politics, and the meaning of human existence. The influence of ancient Egyptian civilization on later cultures extended far beyond the borders of Egypt itself. Egyptian artistic motifs, architectural techniques, and religious concepts spread throughout the ancient world through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. The Greek historians Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus wrote extensively about Egyptian customs and achievements, while Greek philosophers like Plato acknowledged their debt to Egyptian wisdom. Roman emperors built Egyptian-style monuments throughout their empire, while early Christian monasticism drew heavily upon Egyptian spiritual traditions. The legacy of ancient Egypt in the modern world reflects both the direct influence of Egyptian achievements and the continuing fascination that pharaonic civilization exercises over contemporary imagination. Egyptian contributions to mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and engineering provided foundations for later scientific development, while Egyptian artistic and architectural principles influenced styles and movements throughout history. The concept of divine kingship that characterized pharaonic rule influenced political theory and practice in many later civilizations, while Egyptian religious beliefs about the afterlife contributed to the development of later theological traditions. The preservation and study of ancient Egyptian monuments and artifacts has become a global responsibility that transcends national boundaries. The rescue of the Abu Simbel temples during the construction of the Aswan High Dam demonstrated international cooperation in preserving cultural heritage, while ongoing archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Egyptian civilization. Museums throughout the world house Egyptian collections that allow millions of people to encounter the artistic and cultural achievements of the pharaonic past, while scholarly research continues to deepen our understanding of Egyptian society, religion, and intellectual achievement. As you sink into the deepest levels of peaceful rest, let your consciousness drift through the timeless galleries of museums where Egyptian artifacts rest in climate-controlled cases, their golden surfaces gleaming softly under carefully regulated lights. The canopic jars that once held the organs of mummified pharaohs, the delicate jewelry that adorned noble ladies 4,000 years ago, the papyrus scrolls inscribed with spells for navigating the afterlife, all speak to the eternal human concerns with beauty, meaning, and transcendence that connected ancient Egyptians to all who came after them. The modern Republic of Egypt continues to grapple with the legacy of its pharaonic past, while building a contemporary identity that honors ancient achievements while addressing modern challenges. The Nile continues to flow through the heart of the country, though its annual flood is now controlled by modern dams and irrigation systems. Ancient monuments stand beside modern cities, while traditional crafts and customs persist alongside contemporary technology and global culture. The tension between preservation and progress, between honoring the past and embracing the future, reflects the complex relationship that all modern societies have with their historical inheritance. The spiritual legacy of ancient Egypt continues to influence religious and philosophical movements throughout the world. The Egyptian preoccupation with death and the afterlife, the concept of cosmic order and divine justice, and the sophisticated understanding of the relationship between the human and divine realms all contributed to later religious developments. The Hermetic traditions that emerged from Hellenistic Egypt influenced medieval and Renaissance thought, while modern spiritual movements continue to draw inspiration from ancient Egyptian wisdom and symbolism. The artistic influence of ancient Egypt extends far beyond the realm of archaeology and museum collections. Egyptian motifs and techniques influenced Art Deco design in the 20th century, while Egyptian themes appear regularly in popular culture, literature, and film. The enduring fascination with Egyptian mummies, pyramids, and pharaohs reflects something deeper than mere curiosity about the exotic past. It represents a recognition of the profound achievements of a civilization that grappled successfully with fundamental human challenges and created works of lasting beauty and meaning. The conservation challenges facing Egyptian monuments today reflect both the achievements of the past and the pressures of the present. The pollution of modern Cairo threatens ancient monuments, while tourism brings both economic benefits and conservation challenges. Climate change and rising groundwater levels pose new threats to monuments that have survived for millennia, while the political instability that has periodically affected the region complicates conservation efforts. The international community's response to these challenges demonstrates the global recognition of Egypt's importance as a repository of human cultural achievement. The scholarly study of ancient Egypt continues to evolve as new technologies and methodologies reveal previously unknown aspects of pharaonic civilization. Satellite archaeology has identified previously unknown sites, while advanced imaging techniques have revealed hidden chambers in pyramids and tombs. DNA analysis of mummies provides insights into ancient Egyptian health and ancestry, while computer modeling helps reconstruct ancient buildings and landscapes. These technological advances ensure that the study of ancient Egypt will continue to yield new discoveries and insights for generations to come. The linguistic legacy of ancient Egypt persists in the Coptic language, which preserves the latest form of the Egyptian language in a script derived from Greek letters. While Coptic is no longer spoken as a living language except in religious contexts, it provides crucial insights into ancient Egyptian phonology and vocabulary that help scholars understand hieroglyphic and hieratic texts. The preservation of Coptic traditions within Egyptian Christianity maintains a direct link to the pharaonic past that spans over 4 millennia of continuous cultural tradition. The economic systems developed by ancient Egypt continue to provide insights into sustainable development and resource management. The Egyptian understanding of the Nile's annual cycle and their development of irrigation systems that worked with rather than against natural patterns offer lessons for modern environmental management. The pharaonic system of state storage and distribution of grain during times of plenty and scarcity provides historical precedents for dealing with economic uncertainty and climate variability that remain relevant today. the remarkable stability of Egyptian civilization over 3 millennia demonstrates the effectiveness of economic systems based on renewable resources, careful resource management, and long-term planning that prioritized sustainability over short-term profit. The agricultural innovations developed along the Nile Valley created the foundation for one of history's most enduring civilizations. The Egyptian mastery of irrigation, crop rotation, and flood management transformed the desert into one of the ancient world's most productive agricultural regions. The shadoof, a simple but effective lever system for lifting water, remains in use throughout Egypt and the Middle East today, while the basin irrigation system that channeled floodwaters across the valley floor provided a model for sustainable agriculture that worked in harmony with natural cycles. These techniques supported population densities that would not be matched in many parts of the world until the modern era. The social structures that emerged from Egypt's agricultural abundance created patterns of organization and governance that influenced civilizations throughout the ancient world. The concept of centralized administration, coordinated by a literate bureaucracy, the integration of religious authority with political power, and the development of complex legal systems all originated in the Nile Valley and spread throughout the Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. The Egyptian model of divine kingship provided a template for royal ideology that influenced rulers from Mesopotamia to Europe, while Egyptian administrative practices were adopted and adapted by successive conquerors who recognized their effectiveness. As you drift deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep, let your mind wander through the vast archives of ancient Egyptian texts that preserve not only royal decrees and religious formulas, but also the everyday concerns of ordinary people. Letters between family members separated by distance or death, legal documents recording property transactions and marriage contracts, school exercises where young scribes practice their hieroglyphs, all reveal a society of remarkable complexity and sophistication. The Egyptian emphasis on written documentation created one of history's most complete records of ancient life, providing insights into human nature and social organization that remain relevant across the millennia. The medical knowledge preserved in Egyptian papyri represents one of humanity's earliest systematic approaches to understanding and treating disease. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to the Second Intermediate period but copying much older material, contains surgical procedures and anatomical observations that demonstrate remarkable empirical knowledge of human physiology. Egyptian physicians understood the importance of the pulse, recognized the connection between brain injuries and paralysis, and developed surgical techniques for treating wounds and fractures that would not be improved upon for centuries. The integration of empirical observation with magical thinking that characterized Egyptian medicine reflects a holistic approach to healing that acknowledged both physical and spiritual dimensions of illness. The mathematical achievements of ancient Egypt laid crucial foundations for later scientific development. The Egyptian decimal system, their methods for calculating areas and volumes, and their sophisticated understanding of geometric principles enabled the construction of monuments whose precision continues to amaze modern engineers. The Moscow and Rind mathematical papyri preserve problems and solutions that demonstrate Egyptian mastery of practical mathematics, including early approaches to calculating pi and methods for solving complex geometric problems. These mathematical traditions influenced Greek learning and contributed to the development of mathematical thinking throughout the ancient world. The astronomical knowledge accumulated by Egyptian priest astronomers over millennia of careful observation created one of humanity's most accurate early calendar systems. The Egyptian civil calendar of 365 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 additional days, provided the foundation for the Julian and Gregorian calendars that govern modern timekeeping. Egyptian astronomers identified and named many constellations, tracked the movements of planets, and developed methods for predicting eclipses that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The alignment of pyramids and temples with astronomical phenomena reflects not only technical skill, but also profound integration of cosmic and earthly order that characterized Egyptian thought. The engineering achievements of ancient Egypt extended far beyond the famous pyramids to encompass a vast range of technologies and construction techniques that influenced building practices throughout the ancient world. Egyptian architects developed methods for quarrying, transporting, and precisely placing massive stone blocks that enabled the construction of monuments whose scale and precision would challenge even modern builders. The use of ramps, levers, and coordinated labor gangs allowed Egyptian engineers to achieve results that seemed impossible given their technological limitations, while their understanding of materials science enabled them to create structures that have endured for millennia. The artistic traditions established during the Pharaonic period created visual languages that influenced cultures throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. Egyptian artistic conventions, with their emphasis on clarity, permanence, and symbolic meaning, provided models for representation that were adopted and adapted by Greek, Roman, and later European artists. The Egyptian mastery of sculpture, painting, jewelry making, and decorative arts set standards for technical excellence and aesthetic achievement that continue to inspire artists long after the fall of the pharaonic state. The rediscovery of Egyptian art during Napoleon's expedition and subsequent archaeological excavations profoundly influenced European artistic movements from neoclassicism through Art Deco. As the night continues its gentle embrace, drawing you deeper into peaceful rest, consider the profound influence of Egyptian religious and philosophical thought on the development of human spirituality. The Egyptian concepts of Ma'at, cosmic order, the judgment of the dead, and the possibility of eternal life contributed to religious traditions throughout the ancient world and continue to influence spiritual thinking today. The sophisticated Egyptian understanding of the relationship between earthly existence and cosmic reality, embodied in their complex mythology and elaborate funeral practices, grappled with fundamental questions about the meaning of life and death that remains central to human experience. The preservation techniques developed by Egyptian embalmers created the most sophisticated understanding of human anatomy in the ancient world. The process of mummification required detailed knowledge of internal organs, chemical processes, and preservation methods that would not be surpassed until the development of modern pathology. The Egyptian understanding of decomposition and preservation influenced later developments in medicine and chemistry, while the religious beliefs that motivated mummification contributed to concepts of bodily resurrection that would influence later theological traditions. The thousands of mummies preserved in Egyptian tombs continue to provide valuable information about ancient health, nutrition, and lifestyle patterns. The literary achievements of ancient Egypt created narrative and poetic traditions that influenced storytelling throughout the ancient world. The Egyptian mastery of different literary genres, from wisdom literature and religious hymns to adventure stories and love poetry, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of language, narrative structure, and emotional expression. Works like the story of Sinuf and the tale of the shipwrecked sailor established narrative conventions that would influence later literary traditions, while Egyptian love poetry revealed emotional sophistication and literary artistry that seems remarkably modern in its psychological insight and aesthetic achievement. The diplomatic traditions established during Egypt's imperial period created precedents for international relations that influenced statecraft throughout the ancient world. The Egyptian practice of treaty making, their development of diplomatic immunity for ambassadors, and their sophisticated understanding of balance of power politics provided models for international relations that were adopted by successive civilizations. The Amarna letters reveal a complex international system of alliance, trade, and cultural exchange that demonstrates Egyptian leadership in developing the institutional frameworks necessary for peaceful coexistence among competing powers. The urban planning principles developed in Egyptian cities influenced the development of urban civilization throughout the Mediterranean world. The planned layout of cities like Akhenaten, with its carefully designed residential districts, administrative centers, and religious complexes, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of urban organization and public health. Egyptian architects understood the importance of proper drainage, the benefits of wide streets for both traffic flow and public gatherings, and the symbolic importance of monumental architecture in creating civic identity. These urban planning principles influenced later Greek and Roman city design and contributed to the development of modern urban planning theory. The trade networks established by Egyptian merchants created some of the ancient world's most extensive commercial relationships. Egyptian expeditions reached as far south as modern Somalia, as far north as the Baltic Sea, and as far east as India, creating trade relationships that brought exotic goods into Egypt while spreading Egyptian influence throughout the known world. The Egyptian understanding of commercial law, their development of standardized weights and measures, and their sophisticated approaches to banking and credit created institutional frameworks that facilitated long-distance trade and contributed to economic development throughout the ancient world. The gender relationships that characterized Egyptian society were remarkably progressive by ancient standards and provide insights into alternative approaches to social organization. Egyptian women enjoyed legal rights and social freedoms that would not be matched in many societies until the modern era. They could own property, initiate divorce proceedings, engage in business activities, and serve in religious roles that gave them significant social authority. The prominence of female pharaohs like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra VII, while exceptional, was possible only because Egyptian society had developed institutional frameworks that recognized female political capacity and leadership ability. As you sink deeper into the tranquil rhythms of sleep, let your consciousness drift through the sacred precincts of Karnak Temple, where generations of priests maintained religious traditions that connected earthly worship with cosmic order. The massive columns of the great hypostyle hall, carved with hieroglyphic texts that preserved ancient wisdom, created sacred spaces that facilitated communication between human and divine realms. The daily temple rituals performed in these spaces, involving elaborate offerings and ceremonial procedures, maintained the spiritual connections that Egyptians believed necessary for cosmic stability and social harmony. The philosophical traditions that emerged from Egyptian religious thought contributed to the development of systematic approaches to understanding reality that influenced later Greek and Roman philosophy. The Egyptian concept of Ma'at, encompassing truth, justice, and cosmic order, provided a framework for ethical thinking that addressed both individual behavior and social organization. Egyptian wisdom literature, with its emphasis on practical ethics and social responsibility, created literary forms that influenced moral philosophy throughout the ancient world. The integration of religious and philosophical thinking that characterized Egyptian intellectual tradition provided models for comprehensive worldviews that address both spiritual and practical concerns. The educational systems developed in Egyptian scribal schools created literacy rates and intellectual sophistication that were not matched elsewhere in the ancient world. The Egyptian emphasis on education as a means of social advancement, their development of standardized curricula and teaching methods, and their integration of practical skills with cultural knowledge created educational models that influenced learning throughout the Mediterranean world. The survival of numerous school exercises and educational texts reveals teaching methods that emphasize memorization, repetition, and gradual progression from simple to complex skills. Approaches that remain central to effective education today. The conservation techniques developed by Egyptian craftsmen created standards for preserving organic materials that were not surpassed until the modern era. The Egyptian understanding of desiccation, chemical preservation, and environmental control enabled them to preserve not only human remains, but also textiles, wood, papyrus, and other organic materials that would normally decompose in Egypt's climate. These preservation techniques, developed primarily for religious purposes, created vast repositories of ancient artifacts that continue to provide invaluable information about Egyptian material culture and daily life. The influence of Egyptian civilization on early Christianity was profound and multifaceted, reflecting both theological parallels and practical connections. The Egyptian tradition of monasticism, developed by figures like Saint Anthony the Great, created new forms of Christian spiritual life that spread throughout the Christian world. Egyptian theological schools, particularly in Alexandria, played crucial roles in defining Christian doctrine during the early centuries of the Church. The Coptic Christian community that emerged in Egypt preserved many elements of pharaonic culture within Christian frameworks, creating synthetic traditions that maintained continuity with the ancient past while embracing new spiritual insights. The legacy of Egyptian architectural techniques extends far beyond the famous monuments of the Pharaonic period to encompass construction methods that influenced building practices throughout the ancient and medieval worlds. Egyptian mastery of stone cutting, their understanding of structural engineering, and their development of sophisticated lifting and transportation techniques provided technical knowledge that was adopted and adapted by later civilizations. The influence of Egyptian architectural principles can be seen in Greek temples, Roman monuments, and even modern buildings that employ Egyptian-inspired design elements and construction methods. The metallurgical knowledge developed by Egyptian craftsmen contributed significantly to technological development throughout the ancient world. Egyptian metalworkers developed sophisticated techniques for mining, smelting, and working copper, bronze, gold, and iron that set standards for technical excellence and artistic achievement. The Egyptian understanding of alloy composition, their mastery of decorative techniques like cloisonné and granulation, and their development of sophisticated tools and weapons influenced technological development throughout the Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. The survival of numerous Egyptian metal artifacts demonstrates both technical skill and artistic vision that continue to inspire modern craftsmen. The agricultural techniques developed in the Nile Valley created sustainable farming systems that supported one of the ancient world's largest populations while maintaining soil fertility over millennia. The Egyptian understanding of crop rotation, their integration of livestock raising with plant cultivation, and their development of irrigation systems that worked with natural flood cycles created agricultural models that were adopted throughout the ancient world. The Egyptian success in transforming a desert environment into one of antiquity's most productive agricultural regions demonstrates the effectiveness of farming systems that worked in harmony with natural processes rather than against them. As the gentle night draws you into its deepest embrace, rest in the knowledge that the spirit of ancient Egypt continues to flow through countless aspects of modern life, often in ways so fundamental that they go unnoticed. In the legal principles that protect individual rights while maintaining social order, in the educational systems that value both practical skills and cultural knowledge, in the artistic traditions that seek to capture eternal truths through temporal forms, the wisdom of the pharaonic past continues to enrich human civilization. The integration of spiritual and material concerns that characterized Egyptian thought provides models for holistic approaches to life that remain relevant in our complex modern world. The psychological insights embedded in Egyptian religious texts and artistic representations reveal sophisticated understanding of human nature that anticipated many developments in modern psychology. The Egyptian conception of the soul as composed of multiple elements, K, Ba, AKH, provided frameworks for understanding personality and consciousness that paralleled later psychological theories. Egyptian dream texts and their interpretations demonstrated understanding of the unconscious mind that would not be systematically explored again until the development of modern psychoanalysis. The Egyptian emphasis on the afterlife as a continuation of earthly existence, requiring proper preparation and ethical behavior, created comprehensive approaches to human development that address both practical and spiritual needs. The scientific methodology implicit in Egyptian approaches to medicine, astronomy, and mathematics established principles of empirical observation and systematic record-keeping that influenced the development of scientific thinking throughout the ancient world. Egyptian physicians maintained detailed records of symptoms and treatments that enabled them to develop increasingly effective medical procedures. Egyptian astronomers kept careful observations of celestial phenomena over centuries, creating databases that enabled accurate calendar systems and astronomical predictions. Egyptian mathematicians developed problem-solving approaches that emphasized practical applications, while also exploring theoretical questions about geometric relationships and numerical patterns. The technological innovations developed for pyramid construction created engineering knowledge that was applied to a wide range of other projects throughout Egyptian history. The techniques developed for quarrying and transporting massive stone blocks were used in temple construction, harbor development, and urban planning projects that transformed the Egyptian landscape. The organizational methods developed for coordinating large-scale construction projects influenced administrative practices in other areas of Egyptian government and society. The problem-solving approaches developed by Egyptian engineers provided models for systematic thinking about complex technical challenges that influenced technological development throughout the ancient world. The artistic techniques developed by Egyptian craftsmen established standards for technical excellence and aesthetic achievement that influenced art production throughout the Mediterranean world. Egyptian mastery of sculpture, their understanding of proportion and composition, and their development of sophisticated decorative techniques provided models that were adopted and adapted by Greek, Roman, and later European artists. The Egyptian integration of artistic and religious concerns created approaches to art that emphasize both aesthetic beauty and spiritual significance, providing models for sacred art that influenced religious traditions throughout the ancient world. The commercial practices developed by Egyptian merchants created institutional frameworks for long-distance trade that facilitated economic development throughout the ancient world. Egyptian development of standardized weights and measures, their sophisticated approaches to banking and credit, and their understanding of commercial law provided models for business practices that were adopted by trading partners throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. The Egyptian success in maintaining profitable trade relationships over vast distances and extended periods demonstrated the effectiveness of commercial systems based on mutual benefit and legal reliability. The cultural synthesis that characterized Ptolemaic Egypt created models for multicultural societies that balanced respect for local traditions with integration into broader political and economic systems. The Ptolemaic success in governing a diverse population while maintaining political stability demonstrated the effectiveness of administrative approaches that combined central authority with local autonomy. The intellectual achievements of Ptolemaic Alexandria, drawing upon Egyptian, Greek, and other cultural traditions, created centers of learning that influenced education and scholarship throughout the ancient world. The linguistic legacy of ancient Egypt extends far beyond the preservation of the Egyptian language in Coptic religious texts to encompass influences on vocabulary and writing systems throughout the ancient world. Egyptian loanwords entered Greek, Latin, and other ancient languages, while Egyptian hieroglyphic writing influenced the development of other writing systems throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. The Egyptian development of alphabetic writing principles, preserved in the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions, contributed to the development of alphabetic writing systems that would eventually become the foundation for modern literacy. The astronomical knowledge accumulated by Egyptian observers over millennia created one of humanity's most comprehensive early understanding of celestial phenomena. Egyptian identification of constellations, their tracking of planetary movements, and their development of methods for predicting astronomical events influenced astronomical thinking throughout the ancient world. The Egyptian understanding of the relationship between celestial and terrestrial cycles contributed to the development of astrology and influenced religious and philosophical thinking about cosmic order and human destiny. The final saga of ancient Egypt lies not in any single monument or achievement, but in the living legacy that continues to enrich human civilization through countless channels of influence that flow as surely and constantly as the Nile itself. In the museums of the world, where Egyptian treasures rest in climate-controlled splendor, in the libraries where ancient texts preserve the voices of scribes and pharaohs, in the archaeological sites where new discoveries continue to reveal the complexity and sophistication of pharaonic civilization, the spirit of ancient Egypt endures as a testament to human creativity, resilience, and aspiration. The sacred river continues its ancient journey from the highlands of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea, carrying with it the same life-giving waters that sustained the pyramid builders and nourished the gardens of Cleopatra's Alexandria. Along its banks, the same stars wheel overhead that once guided Egyptian astronomers in their calculations and inspired Egyptian poets in their hymns to the eternal order of creation. In this timeless rhythm of river and stars, of flood and harvest, of life and death and renewal, the spirit of ancient Egypt endures, connecting the deepest past to the farthest future through the unbroken chain of human memory and achievement. In the quiet chambers of the Cairo Museum, where golden masks catch the subdued lighting and ancient jewelry sparkles behind protective glass. In the shadows of the great pyramids at Giza, where tourists gather daily to marvel at achievements that seemed impossible even to their builders. In the temple ruins scattered throughout the Nile Valley, where hieroglyphic inscriptions preserve the wisdom of ages. The ancient Egyptians achieved their ultimate goal of immortality, not through the preservation of individual consciousness, but through the creation of a civilization so rich, so complex, and so profoundly human that it continues to speak to every generation that encounters its magnificent legacy, flowing like the eternal Nile toward the endless sea of human consciousness and aspiration.